Fair enough. And yeah, so you, one of the things actually I should say that you say right at the beginning of the piece and go back to is that like Davis has a history of correctly predicting all sorts of terrible things, that have happened. I mean, so he's definitely not a peddler of false hope. He's somebody who's talking about how the labor movement was going to keep declining. He's somebody who's talking about various environmental catastrophes before they really reach public consciousness. He's somebody who was talking about the danger of pandemics overwhelming the public healthcare system long before COVID.
Yes. So his first book that really breaks through into the mainstream is his second book, which is called City of Quartz, and it's a book that is just it's an astonishingly original synthesis of so many strands of history and culture in Los Angeles, and it's describing what is the state of the city of Los Angeles when it comes out, which I believe was 1990. I'm not positive about that off the top of my head. Yes, 1990. And it comes out shortly before Rodney King and the LA riots, and it's describing this pressure cooker atmosphere of incredible urban inequality in Los Angeles. And it, shortly after it comes out, these major riots pop off in LA, and he's seen as a kind of prophet. I mean, the book comes out and people are like, whoa, like, what is this? This book's wild. And then it seems to almost predict the explosions of the Rodney King riots. And after that, he becomes this kind of intellectual celebrity. And, what a strange and unlikely thing, this Marxist former truck driver in 1990 or in the early 1990s at the height of, just finished up with Reaganism, and it's sort of seamlessly transitioned into the era of Clintonism, or about to transition into Clintonism of the 90s. And as I said, it's like the go-go 80s and 90s. It's the capitalist triumphalism is like in full swing, and then this guy shows up and drops a turd in the punch bowl, and then is seen as being like actually quite accurate in how he was describing the state of the city. And what's amazing about Davis is that he becomes this intellectual celebrity. I think I read somewhere, I didn't put this in the profile, but I think Bruce Willis was once photographed, I think, for the New York Times Magazine, and he's got a copy of City of Quartz like in the background on a table or something like that. It's like that's the kind of stuff that was happening with Mike Davis. And he becomes like a genuine intellectual celebrity. He wins like a Genius Grant, and he's got all these people knocking on his door, screenwriters and famous academics, and he's being feted to lecture all around the world. And he could have really sort of cashed in on this newfound intellectual fame that he has. And in the Adam Schatz profile, he talks about how Davis was at one point under contract to write a book after the LA riots about the LA riots. That would have been the smart career move to do when you're seen as the guy who predicted the LA riots. Then you should write a book after the LA riots. And he starts working on it, and he can't stomach it. He gets deeply involved in former gang members in Los Angeles who are trying to broker truces and are actually advancing this incredible social democratic agenda. And they're talking about, increasing funding for jobs rather than more police, stuff that sounds pretty familiar today. And he decides that he just can't pull it off. It's too heartbreaking to deal with the reality of these gang members' lives in the form of a book treatment. And he never writes that book follow-up, which to me says a lot about who he is and like his sort of, it's almost like he thought that writing that book would have just been too easy, and like he didn't want to just cash in on his intellectual fame. I mean, he had a whole interesting career where he's helping gang members broker truces, but he was less interested in cashing in to write a big book that would become a New York Times bestseller or something. And that's something that I deeply admire about him.
Yeah, absolutely. and yeah, it's so interesting that not only in that time, he becomes this kind of like, uh, both scholarly and popular, figure in that way, but like also somebody who, yeah, I mean, he didn't. Just in case this got lost earlier, he was back in school for a while, but he never finished a PhD. He was spending his time, driving trucks, throwing, like dropping poisonous and carnivorous animals onto the floor of the New Left Review. So he's clearly not, interested in following that kind of, or sufficiently interested in following that kind of academic track. But is also not interested in following the track of, following up and, like you said, writing the kind of book that people would have expected him to write as a follow-up, or, sort of trying to capitalize on what he'd already done in a way that would have been kind of like rationally self-interested. Like, presumably if he has a book agent, the kind of advice, that agent's giving him.
No, the agent is like, please, Mike, please write the book, please. I need it, you need it, we all need it. Please write the book. And he's like, I don't think so.
Yeah. So take us into the 90s. We talked about City of Quartz. So what does he write after this?
So the next book that he writes is also about Southern California, but it is not the one that we thought he would write, the follow-up to the LA riots. It's called Ecology of Fear. It comes out in 1998. And another just astonishingly wild synthesis of a book. Not at all what you would expect him to be writing given his history. And what's most notable about this book, which is about the ecology of Southern California, is how he's written this first book, Prisoners of the American Dream, about the organized working class in America, which is probably not surprising for a Marxist historian, right? We're all concerned with this question of the state of the working class movement, and he looks at that movement, and why do we pay attention to it? Because the organized working class is, the most important agent of social change to bring about the world that we all want. So he looks at that and he finds that it's good.
Yeah, and I should say, by the way, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people watching or listening know this, but I mean, I think something that's always worth taking a second to emphasize, when we talk about this, is that the reason that that socialists have traditionally looked to the working class, as that agent of change, isn't necessarily thinking that that the working class is like is like the most oppressed or most morally deserving, element of society. That's not it, right? I mean, at the time that Marx is writing, peasants, elements of the urban poor that aren't even in the working class are doing worse off. Like that's not the question. The question is being in a structural position to shut down society, because it all relies on its labor, and having a collective interest in achieving the kind of better society that that we'd all want, right? So that's why that's why we're interested in that. But then when he looks at this, says, okay, but how that question of structural power, what kind of agency the working class it has, that's not just like a fixed quantity forever. Like that's been affected by past defeats. That's been affected by the way capitalism has changed.
Right. Yeah, all that's true. And so he is not feeling particularly great about the prospect of organized labor to turn around anytime soon. He thinks it's important, of course, but he's not forecasting a turning the corner on the attacks on the labor movement, the decline in its power. And so what he does in 1988 with Ecology of Fear is identify this other second concern of his writing career, which is the first one was workers, and the second one is the weather. And when you say the weather, I mean, obviously now lots of people are talking about climate change, and he writes about climate change sometimes, but that's not really what he means. I mean, he's concerned with like the weather as its own like autonomous agent in constructing and reshaping the world. He sees it as like an agent who it's important to like understand that it just sort of functions of its own accord, and like petty human exertions to try to change that or to conquer it or to ignore it are, you know, the height of human folly, and the weather will have its last laugh. And so the book is about the ecology of Southern California, and I mean, just, you know, it's you name it. I mean, you know, tornadoes, fires, wildfires, earthquakes. You know, squirrels bearing bubonic plague, you know, cougars coming in from the mountains to like terrorize the children of, you know, who live in suburban tract homes that just got built. I mean, it's all about how the ecology of Southern California is, as he describes it, a revolutionary, not reformist landscape. And as this sort of center of, you know, like real estate development, like pushing into every nook and cranny wherever it can go in Southern California, and you know, California in general as being, you know, sort of like, it's the West. It's like it's like almost like a frontier mentality, you know, and we're gonna conquer all this stuff, and we're gonna tame the wilderness. And a bunch of the book is about how foolish this is, and how the weather is untamable. I write in the profile about the most famous chapter in the book, which is called "The Case for Letting Malibu Burn." And it's all about how this area of Southern California, Malibu, folks know the name. Everyone remembers hopefully everyone remembers the Hole song, the lesser known Hole song from the 90s, Malibu, where there's fires burning in the video, actually. That this is this place where, you know, movie stars and entertainment executives and like rich people live, and it's also the place where there's just uncontrollable wildfires that sweep through it because of the specificities of Malibu's ecology on a regular basis. And I write in the piece about how you know, he's talking about this sort of contest between these extremely wealthy movie stars and executives and the fires. And it's very clear who he's rooting for in that contest.
This has been a free public preview of a patron exclusive episode of Give Them an Argument. To get the rest of this episode and every other patron exclusive episode, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis.